We had a client that was about to leave. We weren't meeting their expectations. If you were here for the last video, I went into how we were struggling with aligned priorities as a team, as an organization, and just overall in leadership. And how the real issue wasn't the work, it was about the alignment gap and the misaligned priorities, the gap between the promise and the delivery. This video is about what happens after you discover that there is an alignment gap and what to do about it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so you have to actually act on it and know what to do and know what the next steps are. Most leaders try to solve it the wrong way with pushing the team harder or try to do it by auditing what the team is on. That's just the beginning, but then it falls flat after that. Or they'll do an entire overhaul and restructure everything and break it. Let's talk about how alignment saved the client relationship. Before this, the person who had the strongest relationship with the client was saying yes to everything. This person was getting everything met with or without the team. What this did was unintentionally set a precedence on the team that every request, every demand had no barrier, that it was going to be done regardless of the strain. And I had to have a conversation with who was overpromising these things and let him know what we could realistically commit to and to stop saying yes to everything because it was putting us in a bind. What was happening was it was fracturing the trust between the client and the team because they didn't trust the team to deliver. So first, we clarified real priorities. We asked, what are the outcomes that you are wanting? And what you'll see is that most clients either are clear about what they're wanting or they really don't know how to articulate what are the outcomes that they're wanting. Some of them have a long laundry list of the things that they're wanting. And then we got into what timelines mattered. If they were telling us we got these 10 priorities that needed to be done, okay, when do they need to be done by? Everything can't be urgent. So we would maybe pick 3 and we would say, okay, these are the top 3 things that we were focused on this week. We'll set targets for these other things. And then anything else that comes in will be on a best efforts basis. What you're training your client to do is to understand how you work. You're setting standards and you're letting them know that this is how we work. You're letting them know that there's a system to how you work, and that builds trust. They're going to respect you a lot more when you say, hey, I understand that this matters to you. I get that. However, this is what our process is, and this is what we tend to do. Now, I'm not saying that they won't push back on these things because they might. But what you're doing is you're still setting a precedence for how you're wanting things to run and how you're wanting things to go. We also talked about what the success looked like to you. So in this particular instance, what they said was, we don't want to have a certain item over 9 months, or we don't want to have a certain outstanding issue over 6 months. That was very clear to us because then we can measure it and then we can make sure that we're hitting those targets. It really does help you get clear on the standards and the principles that you're setting as a team and how you can help your supervisors and your people leaders manage the people who are going to be executing on the work. You're having your manager look at the performance reviews of the team, that they're looking at these as performance standards. The next thing we did was we aligned the team. What I noticed was we had so many people operating outside of their roles and outside of their duties, including myself. So I was doing a role of 2 people, and that was taxing on the team, which meant that there was lack of oversight, that tasks were being missed, that things were not being completed by the deadline, that we had very low performers who weren't receiving the support that they needed. It was a whole domino effect. And so we had to restructure the team so that everybody was clear and everybody had clear ownership of their lanes. And then we also had to look at some of our processes and the things that we were doing. You're not supposed to stay stuck in the things that you were doing when you were a 5-person company. You're supposed to be growing and evolving your systems. And so we started to automate things and started to redelegate things and redistribute things. I also redesigned their end-of-day checklist. Their end-of-day checklist at first was very basic at the time. And they griped and they groaned about it at first. They did not like it because it was a very lengthy end of day checklist, but it was very intentional. And so they were meant to work through it for the day, and so that they can capture everything that was of matters of importance so that they can get it done all throughout the day. Now, this did include doing an audit of all of the things that they needed to do for the day, because you do have to audit the things that you're spending time on. Now, I was working in a very high risk environment where one mistake could cost the company thousands of dollars. And so we did have to put in cross checks and balances to make sure that things were not being missed. It worked out to where it was a flow to where one person would check something in the day and the other person would check it in the evening. But we did have like different cross checks at different times to make sure that everything was being checked multiple times a day, not just by one person. And everybody had their own separate end of day checklist that they had. It was tiered. The director had theirs, the supervisor had theirs, the seniors had theirs, and the juniors, they all had theirs. The impact of this was huge. It was immediate. So we were able to drastically decrease overtime. Before, people were staying, including me, we were staying online until 9 p.m., 12 a.m. We were able to get off work on time, meaning the team was able to get off at 5, no later than 6. We had 2 open positions out there that we didn't need. We thought that we were going to hire 2 people and we didn't need it. We were short staffed because we thought that we were operating the incorrect way. So it was the same team, but we just changed how we operated. And so this change to our structural environment meant that even when people were out, our operations still were going, and including when we had huge projects that came down the pipeline, we were able to get them done because of the structure that we had implemented. And the best part is the client decided to stay. They even gave us more of their business because we were hitting their targets. We were meeting their expectations. We were tracking the things that they wanted us to track. And they started to chip away at some of the things that we had put on their list as things that were issues as to why they wanted to leave in the first place. It started to be to the point where they didn't even show up to calls anymore. The calls used to be so stressful, but we actually built a very strong relationship to where the calls started feeling more enjoyable. They started feeling lighter. They weren't as tense as they were. We started talking about random things like, what are you doing for the weekend? It was beautiful. We completely transformed the relationship of the client. The problem was not a capacity issue. The problem wasn't lazy employees. It wasn't because people didn't care. It was misalignment. Most businesses often think that they have a capacity problem or a people problem, but they actually have a structural problem. When priorities are clear, ownership is clear, and the systems support the work, things become a lot easier to manage. The same team can produce a very different result when all of these things are aligned. If you recognize yourself in parts of this story, then I want to invite you to download The Root Cause. The link is in the description. It walks through how leadership misalignment shows up as lost revenue and operational friction in your business.